Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. This is going to be a weekend preview of the main fights of the weekend, and somewhat quiet in terms of big name fighters, but there is a few interesting fights about the place. And we'll start with the card in Germany. Mahmoud Charr, the WBA champion in recess, taking on Christopher Lovejoy. The weigh-in has occurred, and we're certainly further than I thought we'd ever get with this. Didn't think the fight was going to happen, thought Lovejoy would pull out, and I guess until the bell rings, I'll have a little bit of skepticism. But in terms of the weigh-in, Mahmoud Charr, he was 245 pounds. Remembering this guy's been out of the ring since 2017 when he won the regular title against Alexander Ustinov. So that was taken away from him at the in January when he couldn't fight Trevor Bryan, so he was made a champion in recess. And you'll note, so see this photo here, there is actually a WBA belt in the background, so have no idea what that's about, what sort of belt that actually is, because if you're the champion in recess, do you actually have a belt? I wasn't sure about that. Anyway, on the other side of the coin though, and this is maybe the more noteworthy thing from the weigh-in, Lovejoy, over 300 pounds, 306 pounds to be specific. So for me, this sort of feeds into the preview that I did the other day that I thought Mahmoud Charr is probably going to knock out Christopher Lovejoy. And if Charr can just sort of be defensively responsible to some degree in those early rounds, Lovejoy, in my view, is going to gas out. 306 pounds, he doesn't seem to have the best cardio, but I guess we're going to see, because who really knows how good Christopher Lovejoy is? We've seen just a little bit of footage of him. Most of it is cab drivers and street sweepers down in Mexico. Padded out his record, 19 wins, 19 knockouts, but maybe soon to be 19-1. But if he does manage to pull the upset off here, that will actually legitimize Christopher Lovejoy to some extent. Although, having said that, you know, Charr inactive for over 3.5 years, never that great, but he is sort of a known commodity. So on the basis of a win over Charr, you could actually go, well, Lovejoy deserves some credit for getting that win if he can get it. But I'm not expecting that. I think Charr is going to get the win here, probably by stoppage, probably inside 6 or 7 rounds. I think Lovejoy will start to gas, he'll start to get more ragged, and Charr, who's, you know, pretty basic, pretty straight up and down sort of fighter, I think he'll ultimately start to find, you know, a home for his right hand in particular, and that's probably going to be the money punch for a knockout. Moving on the undercard, you have an up-and-coming prospect in Vickhurst. He's currently 6-0. He is facing a 47-year-old, yes, 47, Jasic Piatek, who's currently 11-0. Piatek, 261 pounds on the scale, Vickhurst at 237.8. And just noting that he's called Victor Faust in Germany, but his real name is Victor Vickhurst. He's a Ukrainian heavyweight coming through 6-0. He's going to get the win here. And I mean, look at Piatek. He certainly, in my view, looks every one of his 47 years. But Victor Vickhurst to win here, and possibly by stoppage. But he's going to take the O of Piatek. And the other heavyweight fight on the card, you've got Christian Hammer, who's a top 30-ish guy there or thereabouts. He's in a pretty dreadful fight. He's facing a guy, Patryk Kowoll, who's 7-24. So an out-and-out journeyman. This shapes as just a tune-up for Christian Hammer, and hopefully onto something bigger and better. Hammer, 247 pounds on the scale, and his opponent, 250. So you'd imagine that he's going to stop him. You'd hope so, given the level of the opposition, and maybe onto something bigger and better, because Hammer, he is a guy who's sort of coming towards that back end of his career, but he's still got enough in the tank to be a very good test for prospects coming through. We saw that against Tony Yoka. Very awkward and difficult. He didn't win many of those rounds, maybe none of those rounds against Yoka, but it was awkward and he made it competitive and tricky for Yoka. It wasn't all one-way traffic, even though the scorecards were pretty lopsided in the end. I think Hammer still has a lot to offer the division in terms of up-and-coming prospects and testing them. So moving on, you've got DEMSEY MCKEAN. He's returning to the ring in Australia. He'll be fighting on a pay-per-view, Epic Centre TV, facing unbeaten New Zealander Kiki Luatelli. So Kiki Luatelli, he's last been in the ring back in 2019, and that was when he faced Julius Long. And I thought he was pretty lucky to escape with a draw. I watched that fight. Long dropped him a couple of times with uppercuts. In a fight, for the most part, Kiki Luatelli was actually winning pretty well. He was outboxing Long, but ultimately open to the uppercut, dropped a couple of times. And it was only, I think it was a 6th rounder or something, so it was pretty close in the end, and maybe lucky to escape with that draw. But coming into this unbeaten against McKean, who's been out for a year now. His last fight was against Jonathan Rice a year ago now, and that was a pretty competitive and exciting fight. He got a late stoppage in that one. I mean, I thought the action, for the most part, Rice in certain spots was dominating. McKean had his moments as well. Ultimately, he was able to close the show, and I think that win has aged well for DEMSEY MCKEAN, because then you had Jonathan Rice fighting FA Ajagba later that year, and he put a really good performance in against Ajagba, and Ajagba at times looked outclassed and didn't really seem to know what to do, although he got the win in that one. So for this one, I'm expecting that DEMSEY MCKEAN, who's the much, you can see here from the weigh-in, the much bigger man with the bigger reach, he's going to dominate probably from the outside. He's a southpaw, he's got a good jab, he's got a good sort of straight left, and I think a punch which could work well for him, which worked well for Julius Long, is looking for the uppercut, because Leutele is going to have to come in, and he is open to being caught. He was open to that shot all night against Julius Long and paid the price. So hopefully he's tightened up his defense, but that could be a money punch for DEMSEY MCKEAN. But if this isn't a decision, it could end up being a stoppage win. But I do think McKean is the favorite for a reason. And this is a pretty, I think a good comeback fight after a year out of the ring. So it's not just an out-and-out journeyman or anything like that. So Kiki Luatelli, so in the scheme of things in New Zealand, he's probably the number 5, number 6 heavyweight there or thereabouts. But good work for McKean. I do expect him to win, but I wouldn't be shocked if there was an upset, but I'm not expecting it. But DEMSEY MCKEAN, Kiki Luatelli, that's on Epic Center TV. So I'll be doing a post-fight review on that. I've already ordered the pay-per-view. And rounding out the videos, so we have the first fight in the pro ranks for Solomon Dacres. So Dacres, who is managed by Sam Jones of SJAM Boxing, he's fighting on this Joshua Boazzi card. He was actually meant to fight earlier this year, but because of some issues getting his license, he had to be pulled off a card, and now he finally gets to go through this first sort of fight camp, get the first fight, and hopefully win under his belt. So he's facing a journeyman, Mladen Manev, and this week he said, I'm looking forward to some solid performances and hopefully some big knockouts. I'm in the fight game to have good fights at the end of the day. The main thing for me is progression. I need to make sure I'm learning, improving with each fight. I want to look good as well. I'm not delusional. I know there's a lot of hard work to go, but when you've got that grounding and experience from the amateurs, it gives you a great platform to push forwards from. I know there's a lot of hard work to be done and lots to learn, but I'm confident I can go all the way. And Dacres, was a decent amateur. He's got good size, 6'5". He's weighed in here just over 220 pounds. So for his size, he's quite trim and, clearly in shape for this one, and probably likely to fill out over time, probably entering the 230s as he sort of beds in sort of into the pro game, sort of fills out a little bit as well. So I do think Solomon Dacres going to get a win here. I mean, it's not a given, but it's almost a given. But I'm looking forward to sort of seeing the skill set, because I don't really know too much about him. I haven't really seen much of him apart from the training footage from social media. He's got good height, he seems to have good skills, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he can bring to the heavyweight division. And it's another name coming through the British scene that I'm looking forward to seeing, like Johnny Fisher, who's also managed by Sam Jones, a number of other young guys starting to come through, that sort of next wave of fighters. But what do you make of the action this weekend? Charr Lovejoy, who you got? You've got Vickhurst versus Piatek. You've got Christian Hammer versus Journeyman. DEMSEY MCKEAN versus Kiki Luatelli. Who have you got in that one? And Solomon Dacres in his pro debut. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.